Greetings again, everybody, and welcome back to Dark Souls 2. We find ourselves back in Iron Keep this time around, and the reason for that is, well, I actually skipped something previously. You may have noticed that I just completely ignored one particular door. Or perhaps not, but it doesn't matter because we're going to go to that door now and see what's behind it. Maybe it is an entire new area that we haven't actually seen yet. Who knows? And I'm kind of using the same strategy, of course, this time around because this is a part that we've already seen. The lightning spears have been nerfed significantly. They have way less casts now, but are a little bit stronger. Essentially, they are something you're supposed to use sparingly, perhaps even wait for a boss. But the basic lightning spear is not really that strong, considering all things, but still, it's a decent spell, I'd say. It's just that you can't really spam it anymore, which is kind of sad. I was also thinking of maybe switching out the mace soon-ish, because I don't really like it as a weapon. A lot of people swear on it, I haven't really used it before this run, and it turns out I'm not too fond of it. So I will probably just go use something else at some point sooner or later. For now, before we actually enter that new area, let us see what's in that chest here and then rest at the bonfire. Of course, I could have come here earlier and rested at the bonfire, but we wouldn't have been able to get back up here, obviously, because that ladder will actually lead us to an entirely new area, which is actually another PvP-based area. And that bonfire here is pretty much there just to allow you to quickly delve back into the fighting of other people. But before we actually do anything, let's see what that dude here has to say.
Undead! Undead! Keep your hands off our bell! The great bell of Fen! The bell belongs to the prince, it do! Stay back or we slice you to bits. Me and my chums, we shan't be miffed. Stay back or your pieces, tiniest pieces. A long time ago, the prince he made me, yes, just like so. This bell! Princess's honour! Stay away, foul undead, or you'll be a goner.
Oh damn it. I was actually trying to talk to him again, but since going through fog gates and talking to people uses the same button, this happened. First time this happened to me though, still it's annoying because I now have to fight those people here. And I'm gonna do it in this enclosed space here. Which actually kind of helps me a lot more because these NPC dudes, they are mostly dangerous if they have the room to dodge around a lot.
Guard the bell, you do! For the princess and prince, forever, for true! Here, for you! Round the bell, you'll be brought near. When the bell is in trouble, the ring brings you here. Slice them to shreds, whoever they are, wherever, whoever, be they near, be they far. Slice them to pieces for the prince, yes! of the fine prince in Ogden, the belle of the princess. Tear him to shreds, tear him to bits, gather around and ring the bell swift. We've been ringing this bell forever, we have. We've been...
Alright, so we joined the Bellkeepers, and this is the Bellkeeper Covenant area. But opposed to the Rat Covenant, this doesn't mean that the enemies here won't attack us. They will. And we can still get invaded by Bellkeepers. Otherwise, this Covenant is kind of similar to the Rat Covenant in that you are kind of a defender. Only instead of forcing other players into your world, you actually straight up invade other people. Which of course puts the pressure off you, because if you die as an invading phantom, you don't really lose anything. But now let's switch to New Game Plus, where we actually use the Twin Blade once more. It was my mistake here to actually use the Stone Twin Blade again and not a different kind, because I don't think this weapon is the best choice. I should probably use the Rusted Iron Twin Blade, which seems like it could be a really good weapon, and perhaps I will use it in a later point, but right now I will have to stand by my earlier opinion that Twin Blades kind of suck. And we kind of already know this Phantom, by the way, because, well, it's pretty similar to the guy that we fought outside of the Undead Purgatory. And we rung the bell, which actually opens up the exit of this area. We're not going to see it in its locked state. Now, I haven't talked much about weapon buffs in this game yet, but generally they are always good. It didn't even matter until before they patched it, whether or not you had a good catalyst or high stats corresponding to whatever sorcery or other magic you were using. But now they affect the length or duration of the buff. All things considered though, buffing your weapon is always a good choice. And if you have, say, a dark infused twin blade, like in this case, you might want to also buff it with dark, because that actually increases the damage output even further. Adding a third damage type might... it will not lower anything, it will still add a bonus, but it'll be more efficient to just add more dark damage on top of dark damage, for instance. Because that will actually make it so your damage output is affected by one less resistance. Every additional damage type will kind of diminish the returns a little bit. Oh, and you actually see me here combining Sacred Oath with my weapon buff. This doesn't work, to my knowledge at least, as of patch 1.07. But it used to, and it's kind of good that they removed it because it was probably overpowered. Whenever you go through this area, by the way, it's pretty much guaranteed that you will get invaded at least once. And if you get invaded, there might also be a second invader. And to top it off, blue phantoms and red phantoms can also invade. And oh, speak of the devil, our first grey spirit is gonna invade now. I'm gonna have to fend him off, while also dealing with that guy, of course. So let's make this as quick as possible to avoid having to deal with multiple opponents, and oh shit, no. Casters in PvP are relatively easy to deal with, honestly, because most of the spells are easy to dodge. And this arena actually gives us a pretty good opportunity to just run from him for a little bit to heal up, which is kinda necessary. Of course, in Dark Souls tradition, I will act real smug after beating him despite having to heal twice. Oh, and that guy was using a fancy halberd move, also very popular in PvP as far as I can tell, but really easy to dodge. And I lag killed him, so let me act like a dick. I normally don't act that way, but I kind of want hate mail. I've never received hate mail in this game, which is something that only few Dark Souls player manage to do, kind of, but I want hate mail. I want it. So I didn't get hate mail here, but at least I won. That's something. And yeah, those guys are the last two enemies in this area that we have to take care of. Or rather, we could just walk through the fog gate, but we should still kill them because they can actually damage us as we try to get through the fog gate. And they're doing a really horrible job at beating them because I'm not used to the attack timing of the one-handed attack of the twin blade because I very rarely actually use it. Those guys, if you can hit them, are actually really easy to take care of because one hit will basically stagger them already, and if you hit them multiple times, well, they're stun locked. But the two-handed attack doesn't actually work, with the twin blade at the very least. It kind of whiffs, which is bad. I don't have to tell you why. But yes, this is actually already Belfry Sol. We have now pretty much left it. There isn't really much of a reason to actually enter it unless you want to do PvP. Unless of course you want some of the items that you can get if you go this way, like Immolation upstairs, which is the spell that sets you on fire and kills you and slightly damages enemies. But there's also this little hidden chamber, which will give us the Black Knight Greatsword, which is probably my favorite greatsword type weapon in this game. It's much different from the Black Knight Greatsword from the first Dark Souls, by the way. The kind of horrible heavy attacks are gone now and replaced with something that's actually useful. But even though we just cleared this area, we're not done for today. We're going to go back to the Lost Bastille, because, well, this is Belfry Sol, which means basically the Belfry of the Sun, which I think everyone is aware of. Which means, in video game tradition, that there's going to be a counterpart, Belfry Luna. And since this area here is bathed in eternal moonlight, I'm pretty sure we're gonna find it here. Maybe even right down here. Now, I always forget that one chest right to our left here, I did not open it here. I did, however, find the Pharaoh's contraption that we have to use to actually get to Belfry Luna. We also had to use them to get to Belfry Sol. In that chest, by the way, is a priest chime, which is a slightly better chime than what we're using right now. Don't worry, I got it off screen.
The princess made me to guard the bell of Ulkin. In Ulkin, the bell of the princess. In then, the bell of the prince. Yes! Tear him to shreds, tear him to bits, gather around and ring the bell swift. We've been ringing this bell forever, we have.
Yes, that guy says exactly the same things as the guy in Belfry Sol, only he replaces prince with princess and vice versa, and then with Alken and vice versa, of course. But yeah, this is basically it. And this whole bell ringing business, by the way, is kind of reminiscent of the first big quest you get in Dark Souls 1, which would be to ring the Bells of Awakening. The Bells of Awakening are a pretty big part of the plot of Dark Souls 1, because they allow you to progress to Analando and maybe awaken something. In this game, however, they don't really serve much of a purpose outside of the Covenants here. They basically open the way onwards in both of the Belfry areas. This area here is just as small as the other one, by the way, only it's laid out much differently. And up there we see a fog gate with a little bit of a gate in front of it. And to remove that gate, we actually have to ring the bell. Of course, you expect the bell to be upstairs, so let's head up that ladder. That would make sense. If we played offline, there would be a chance that we get an NPC invasion here. He doesn't always invade, but sometimes he does. He does, of course, have a chance to drop part of his gear, and I think that he is actually one of the respawning phantoms. Only, of course, he only has a certain chance of actually appearing. Still, it's better than the stupid MMO grinding you sometimes have to do by using ascetics all the time and essentially increase the overall power level of the enemies in any given area, just to maybe get a certain item that has a certain chance of dropping, but the enemy only appears once, which is mostly what happens when NPC invaders show up. This area, of course, is a little more gracious. And the NPC invaders in the Red Covenant areas, by the way, they only show up once in New Game, but they respawn about 10 to 15 times in New Game Plus. So it's also a little more forgiving in that regard. Anyway, we already rang the bell. So let us head through that fog gate and leave the area. Yeah, that's a good hint. In the first game, the Bell Gargoyles were the boss that actually guarded the first Bell of Awakening. It was a pretty cool fight. You would be pitted against one gargoyle, and once you had him down to a certain bit of its health, I think it's half health, a second one would suddenly appear and the game would let you know that it doesn't fuck around. And this was actually fairly early in the game. Now, how could the second game in the series actually implement that fight? Well, by adding more gargoyles, of course. This does not make the fight more challenging, honestly. Just more tedious. You have to kite them and look very, very carefully for an opportunity to attack. And if you don't know about how the mechanics of this boss fights work, you might have a little more trouble than I'm having here. Because see, the gargoyles, they spawn after a certain amount of total health has been depleted. So if you spread out your damage evenly across the gargoyles, you can actually spawn, I will spoil it right here, all 5 of the gargoyles at once. Which of course can cause you some trouble, but if you do it like I do it, you will face 3 at the same time, at most. And once you kill 3 gargoyles, you can just do whatever you want and spread out the damage and all that jazz. Overall, I am not too fond of that fight. The individual gargoyles aren't too hard to take care of, but there being so many really means that you have to wait a lot for an opportunity to attack. This fight here takes me a long while. The fight on New Game Plus though took me about twice as long. I was using the Twin Blade. You don't want to see that fight. While I did do it on my first try on New Game Plus, it still is not an experience I wish to repeat because it was a very long and tedious process. The waiting for a good opportunity to attack combined with a relatively low attack power of the Twin Blades kind of made it horrible. There's really no other way to describe it. When I first did this fight, on my first playthrough ever, I kind of enjoyed it. It kind of curb stomped me first time around because I didn't expect it to be there. But the fact that there's more than just the 2 gargoyles you're presented with initially was something that I did do expect. And yeah, this fight is just kind of bad. I'm not fond of it. It's kind of a lazy term to use, but I would call this boss fight lazy. It's just recycling a boss fight from the first game, which in turn was actually a clever remix of a boss from Demon Souls in a kind of unimaginative way by just adding more of those enemies. I usually skip this. There is one thing that you might want, which makes a later boss fight easier. But if you can do without it, just skip this. Do yourself a favor and skip this. That, or find a way to take care of those gargoyles really quickly, because otherwise it's gonna take a while. I mean, it takes a while for me, even though I think I'm doing a relatively decent job here. Low on health because I'm actually doing that decent of a job, but good enough. Considering that I have to deal with 3 enemies at the same time, not much of a problem though. The best opportunity to attack them, by the way, is whenever they're breathing fire. Of course, when they're breathing fire in the air, you can only hit them with ranged attacks for obvious reasons. On the ground though, they will just stand still, breathe fire, you can get behind them, get in 1 or 2 hits. While also looking out for the other gargoyles, of course. This multiple enemy deal actually worked a lot better for the Ruined Sentinel fight. Even though it kind of... I like the fight, but it suffers from there being 3 completely identical enemies. I wish they were a little bit different. But yeah, while this here fight against these gargoyles is pretty long, or usually ends up being pretty long, the strategy to fight them can be summed up in just 2 words: be patient. That's literally all there is to it. Once you killed enough gargoyles, so there's only 2 or 1 left, the fight of course will get significantly easier, because you will have much more opportunities to attack. And I'm glad it's over now. But there's actually more of a reason to go through here and fight this boss than there is to go through Belfry Sol. Because, as I already alluded to, there is an item that will make a later boss fight a little bit easier. And we're gonna go get it now. In the meantime, just as a little bit of a dick move, if you're a New Game Plus, down here you will find more of those dogs. Red Phantom dogs. Now the dogs are of course not very dangerous, but they're there and they might cause you some grief after that boss fight, which has taken 10 to 15 minutes on this character here. As I said, I do not wish to repeat that. I wish I had used a different weapon for this. But switching in mid-battle is kind of not really a possibility. And this bonfire here is the bane of a no bonfire run. Because if you light it, because you're allowed to light bonfires, you're just not allowed to rest at it, you will not be able to get back up. As you noticed, we kind of dropped down a broken spiral staircase, and this here is a dead end. Which will lead us to the item that we're trying to grab now. Now there is a phantom invading here, but it doesn't really deal much damage. The challenge lies in having to deal with these dogs as well as the phantom. If you can take care of the dogs quickly though, not much of a problem. This entire area is kind of laid out in a similar way as the fight against the Capra demon from the first fight, which hinged on the first few seconds because you were presented with a huge ass goat demon and 2 dogs, and you kind of had to take care of the dogs really quickly or position you in a way that made it really easy to, well, cheese the fight essentially. This here, while arranged kind of similarly, is much easier, and the Bastille key is the reason we came here. Now that we got the Bastille key, we can pretty much just leave and continue on with our lives, and yeah, we're gonna do that. I'm kinda glad it's over, really. I mean, after that fight, it's not that the Belfry areas are bad, it's just that the boss fight against the Belfry gargoyles is quite taxing. But yeah, we did get a boss soul, and we do of course get the opportunity to make a boss weapon. This here is the Gargoyle's Bident. It is a spear type weapon, and it basically does what you expect a spear to do. It stabs things. It seems to be, just going by the numbers, that this spear is kind of a good spear compared to the others, but I have not actually tested it fully upgraded yet, only in its unupgraded form. But yeah, just look at this moveset. Isn't it amazing how it's just a couple thrusts? No matter if it's one-handed or two-handed or light or heavy. Yeah, see, it does kind of decent damage considering it's unupgraded, so I reckon if it's completely upgraded, it's probably decent for a spear. But that's basically it for today. I hope you enjoyed this episode. See you again next time.